I am Frank Wan, Sichungu Lakota hip-hop artist, and you are in the stream.
Hi, I'm Femi OK.
And I'm Malika Bilal, and you're in the stream.
It is World Indigenous Day, and today we are kicking off our series looking at Indigenous issues from around the globe. Our first topic, missing and murdered Native American women. What is being done to solve the crisis in Indian country?
We'll also hear reasons why so many of these cases go unsolved. Now, if you've been impacted by this issue, tweet us during the show at AJStream. There are an estimated 370 million Indigenous people in the world. That's according to the UN, which marks August 9th as the International Day of the World's Indigenous Peoples. Now, if we do not promote Indigenous rights and safeguard the knowledge which Indigenous peoples treasure, we will harm the destiny of all humanity. That's the UN Human Rights Chief Zaid Ra'ad Al Hussein. In Mexico, Environment Secretary Jorge Rescala Perez writes, "Today we celebrate the day for Indigenous people, more than 5% of the world's population. We consider them our guardians of Mother Earth." Now this month, we're following conversations from and about that 5% of the world, and we're using today as a starting point for our series called Indigenous Views. Is there an issue impacting an Indigenous group in your part of the world? Tell us what stories you want us to cover by sending a tweet at AJStream.
Disappearances and violent crime affecting Native American women. It is an issue that continues to scar Native American communities. Online, it is being discussed with the hashtag MMIW, that is short for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women. Their cases receive very little media attention and often suffer from a lack of law enforcement coordination between tribal and local police. More than 4 out of 5 Native American women are expected to experience violence within their lifetime. On some reservations, Native women are murdered far above the national average, but the numbers aren't entirely clear, and that's because comprehensive statistics aren't kept at a national level. So we wanted to know why Native American women are more likely to become victims of violent crime and what should be done to protect them. Joining us to discuss this, in Portland, Oregon, Jacqueline Keeler is a Diné Dakota writer and activist. In Eureka, California, Anita Lucasi is a Southern Cheyenne descendant and doctoral student at the University of Lethbridge. Anita maintains one of the largest databases of cases of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in Canada and the United States. And in Boulder, Colorado, Carla Fredericks is a director of the American Indian Law Clinic and American Indian Law Program, and that is at the University of Colorado. She is an enrolled member of the Madan, Hidatsa, and Arikara Nation of North Dakota. Ladies, I wish I could get you here under better circumstances, but thank you so much for helping us unpack these series of stories and this phenomenon in North America. Anita, this database is extraordinary. Can you tell us a little bit about it? How it was set up, what it does?
Sure. Well, the database was inspired by work that I started a few years ago in trying to assess how all the different ways that Native people are made to disappear within North America. And in trying to find an accurate number of missing or murdered Native women, I found that everyone has a different number. Everyone has a different list. None of them match completely. None of them are updated frequently. And it really was just a mess trying to work through it. And so at that point, I felt a responsibility to step in and fill that gap.
Mm-hmm. These aren't just numbers, though. These are people, these are lives, these are families. Can you share some of those family stories? Because the stats that we had at the top of the show, I can't believe that there's almost any Native family that hasn't been touched by some tragedy or violence or abuse or something out there. Those stats are almost unbelievable.
There really isn't any Native family that hasn't been touched by this in some way. And to give you an example of some of the cases in the database, for me, one of the most personal cases is Ashley Heavy Runner, who has been missing from Browning, Montana, which is on the Blackfeet Nation in northern Montana. She's been missing for over a year. And while she isn't a family member of mine, she was a student when I taught at the tribal college. And she was beautiful inside and out, had a very bright future, was in her final semester, about to graduate, and, has really, the grief that her family is experiencing is something that her community feels as well. And they've really galvanized around her case because that grief is felt so deeply.
And unfortunately, she's not alone, Anita. Of course, as you mentioned, online people are sharing the story of another person. Ryan here tweets, "This is Olivia Lone Bear. Her body was discovered in a truck at the bottom of a lake in North Dakota. Please consider sharing this so her death isn't in vain and help spread awareness." Another person writing about her case, "It is confirmed our missing sister has been found. Please pray for her children and her family and all those that have helped in the efforts to find her." Jacqueline, talk to us about Olivia, 32-year-old North Dakota woman who went missing in October 2017. I know you were writing about her case and covering this story.
Yes, I wrote a piece for High Country News about Olivia's case, and in May, and I got to travel out to North Dakota, to Fort Berthold, the community where she's from, and talk to her family and see the search going on the ground. And they searched for over 8 months, and so it was quite tragic news for them to find out that she's a mother of 4 living children, 1 deceased, and that she came home, but sadly she came home. She was found. Her body was found in a truck that she'd been gone missing in, and it was found over 20 feet in the water in Lake Sakakawea on her reservation.
Jacqueline,
and I think it's important to note,
yes, Anita,
just jumping in.
Yeah, please.
The truck, when it was found, it had been found for days, and her family had struggled with law enforcement for days to get law enforcement to respond adequately in determining that the vehicle was hers, and to find out, if she was in it or if any evidence pertinent to her case was in it. And I think that shows a really powerful example of how difficult it can be in working with law enforcement on this issue, and how things need to change. A woman, she has children. They're about to start a new school year, and they deserve to know where their mom was, and law enforcement could have and should have responded to that better.
Yeah, my article, it was called No Crime Scene, because basically she was told by her family that because there was no crime scene, they couldn't even report her as a missing person. They wouldn't accept a missing persons report, the tribal police. And throughout this, the family felt very strongly that the case was not taken seriously. They had to do a lot of the searching themselves. They really wanted a search of the water. And the reservation is over 1 million acres, and it's in the center of the Bakken, the fracking oil fields in North Dakota. And they could not get the police to address this issue or to actually search the water. And in fact, at the press conference after she was found last Friday, her Matt Lone Bear, her cousin, said that they are being put off again about a water search until October. They'd waited for the water to unfreeze, but really, I hear this story over and over again. From the Loring family in Montana. Here, I live in the Pacific Northwest on the Yakima Reservation. Where often, sadly enough, the police are not helpful in helping to find them, and that there is no protocol in place.
For a second, regarding this whole issue about tribal police, federal police, police response generally in these cases. So I'm a member of the Fort Berthold Mandan Hidatsa Rikara tribe, as you mentioned before, and Olivia was also a member of my tribe. And we've worked extensively with that tribe on issues of how to prosecute and investigate crimes on the reservation. As Jacqueline said, the reservation is about 1 million acres, and it's larger than the state of Delaware. There's only 14 tribal police. Tribes can't tax, and so any tribal police are paid for by the tribe through whatever revenue it's able to establish, either through development or through any number of land-based or gaming-based enterprises. So 14 police to police the size of the state of Delaware. And Delaware has, I think, 1,200 state troopers, and that doesn't include local police. So there's a big mismatch there in terms of
Carla,
resources.
you're making it sound like it's a resources issue.
It's absolutely resources and it's absolutely jurisdiction. So that lake.
So with more resources, there wouldn't be murdered, missing Indigenous women if there was more money. So is there a hierarchy of, well, because... Yeah, go ahead, Carla.
It's about jurisdiction and it's about...
So what you can do on tribal lands and then what you can do on non-tribal lands.
Right, and the lake that we're talking about that Olivia was found in is actually, to some extent, federal land still, because that lake was originally the community of Elbow Woods, which was flooded out to provide electricity for the Pick Sloan project, and my tribe was relocated to 5 segments surrounding the lake. And so there's more coastline on my reservation than the Pacific coast of California. So I don't know how, without adequate resources, and there's supposed to be adequate law enforcement response on that reservation in particular.
And Carla, picking up on what you're saying there, I just wanted to bring this tweet in because it picks up on what Carla was saying. Iva tweets, under current law, tribes cannot prosecute non-natives for sexual assault, and Native American victims are denied access to justice. Anita, can you weigh in here? How true is this?
That's completely true. And fortunately, the FBI declines about 70% of the cases of sexual assault involving a Native victim that they receive. So, that creates an environment where people know that that kind of violence is normal and okay, and that there aren't any consequences because of these jurisdictional gaps where people are able to, exploit. And I do want to add, in discussing this issue of jurisdiction, it's not just cases, even a case that happens, off of a reservation, this jurisdiction question is still an issue.
So, Anita, I just want to be very clear for our international audience watching this, because even in the US, people don't understand this jurisdiction idea. The FBI, if they're on a reservation, can they go into a reservation and investigate a murder or a missing person? Can they do that? Can they go anywhere?
They have the responsibility to do that under federal law. And the big question that I think we would all ask is why isn't that happening?
Why is that not happening?
We don't know. I think that, one of the things in thinking about this issue that's been very obvious to me is that it is a human rights issue. And there has been a situation through U.S. law where Indian people have been dehumanized in multiple ways, particularly with respect to when they're in a situation where they're victims of crime. Instead of being looked at like every other person in the United States, what can we do to prosecute this? The first question is, who did it? Because that's who decides how it's prosecuted. So is it an Indian defendant potentially? Is it a white potentially?
Some of the history.
What crime is it?
Some of the history behind that.
That has no
Jacqueline, hold tight. Carla, finish your sentence. Go ahead. Sorry about that.
It's dehumanizing because it never considers the victim. It never considers their family. And this is a human rights crisis from that perspective.
So I just wanted to address some of the history behind that. In the early, Native reservations are not just like parks. They're actually sovereign nations within the United States, so they have jurisdiction over their own lands. And Native nations actually legally have a status higher than states. The U.S. government doesn't sign treaties with anyone but nations. The Senate doesn't ratify treaties with anyone but nations. And so what happened was in the 19th century, there was some disagreement. I'm Dakota Sioux, and on a Lakota reservation, there was actually a prosecution of a murder. And back east, there was all the yellow journalism going on, and they made a big deal about it. And so they took away jurisdiction over 5 major crimes that the tribes enjoyed, including murder. And so this is why that goes under the jurisdiction of the FBI. And then later, even more jurisdiction was taken away in the 20th century, and whereby tribes could not have jurisdiction over non-federally enrolled people. So if you're not enrolled in a federally recognized tribe, the native nation does not have jurisdiction over you, which leaves a huge gap in prosecution of these crimes and leaves Native women incredibly vulnerable. And of course, in 2013, VAWA, the Violence Against Women's Act, was passed with amendments to address this gap, but it addressed it in a very narrow scope. And just with domestic violence, and only if it's between committed partners. So if you're talking about cases of actual sex trafficking, it wouldn't apply there. It was fought for 2 years. This amendment was fought by Republicans in Congress. And some of the arguments are, well, we don't want the tribes to have jurisdiction over us if we can't vote in their elections. But you go to other countries and you are under the jurisdiction of that country, whether or not you can vote in that country. That's just how it is. And but there's this great unwillingness to basically give tribes jurisdiction over white people. And it's white men that are committing most of these crimes. I mean, according to the data we had, which is not perfect, but allegedly 70% of the perpetrators of these violent crimes against Native women are white men. And if that was...
So Jacqueline, can I just ask you this then? So then this becomes a race crime, hate crimes, this is racism?
Well, it's definitely...
Let me just see. I want you to see. Carlos, you're nodding. Because I don't want to put words in your mouth. You are Native, I am not. You tell me what is the bottom line that this is all racism?
This to me, this fight, this missing and murdered Indigenous women issue is very similar in my mind to Black Lives Matter. Native women matter, and our lives matter. And what is going on in this country, and has been going on in this country for centuries, to deny us our basic humanity and our basic right to life. Not prosecuting, not policing, not investigating, and creating a situation that you're describing accurately as one where criminals feel empowered to go onto these reservations and commit these crimes because they know there's no consequence. Again, like I said, it's a human rights issue. And if it's a human rights issue because of race, then that's what it is. And we can call it that, and we shouldn't be afraid to call it that.
And Carla, in addition to the no seeming consequences, I want to bring this in here because in addition to the seemingly no consequences, there's also people online saying these things also aren't reported as well as they should be. Emmy here on Twitter says, I woke up this morning to see the news talking about a missing woman on the news and thinking about how finding the body of Olivia Lone Bear, who we mentioned earlier, didn't make a blip in national news. Why? Because Native women's death is as American as apple pie. Another person, Marty, tweets into the stream saying there's no reporting system, there's no news coverage, there's no follow-up. They cut short search efforts, and then the families have to rely on fundraising to continue searching for their loved ones. And it's a continuous cycle of Native people being swept under the rug as if we don't exist. Anita, why is this so underreported?
Well, I think there's a number of factors, and it ties into the point that I wanted to make on issues of jurisdiction and racism. It's not just tribal police or the FBI that's failing Native women. And it's not just, this issue doesn't happen just on reservations. So, for example, Savannah Graywind was mentioned. She wasn't living on the reservation. She was living in an urban area, and it wasn't tribal police that failed her. It was local police. There's an ongoing case right now. Her name is Khadijah Britton. She's here in Northern California. She was kidnapped at knife point by her abusive ex-boyfriend. A witness testified to that fact. And for some reason, that wasn't enough, because when he showed up in the courtroom, they decided to dismiss the charges because Khadijah wasn't there in court to testify. Well, she wasn't in court because she's still missing, and her family is still fundraising and doing ground searches themselves. So that's another example of law enforcement that have totally failed to not only protect a Native woman, but hold the perpetrator accountable. And that was the county sheriff. That wasn't tribal police or the FBI. And in collecting this data, one thing that we've done is compare community source data to law enforcement data to see, okay, where are the gaps happening? Where are those miscommunications happening? For example, the state of Washington recently passed legislation that the Washington State Patrol is required to collect data on all missing Native people in the state and report that to the governor's office. We compared the data that the State Patrol currently has to what we have in the database and found that the State Patrol is missing at least a third of missing Native women and girls in the state from their records. And of those cases, only about 10% are cases that happened on a reservation.
So Anita, what I'm thinking about is
other
you help other organizations, other departments who should have this information, you are helping them with their data that they don't have. Is this the activism and the work that's happening within the community where we are saying this is not good enough? I'm wondering if what you're doing, can we put that under progress?
Well, actually, Senator Heidi Heitkamp has put together a law, Savannah's Act, to collect more data.
Right.
And but it does come down to this idea, which one of the tweeters, Marty, mentioned, which is that we are invisible in general, and so when we die, it's not national news, or when our bodies are found, and often they are not found, and so it's I think I made a comparison in my article with the movie Wind River, the Hollywood movie depicting a missing murdered Indigenous woman and girl, and it there the body's found right away, and that is just simply not the case most of the time.
Yeah.
But I think
Jacqueline, I want to show this because I think this helps us sort of visualize what's going on. This is a Facebook page, Lost and Missing in Indian Country. And what it does is it shows you either some of the people who are either missing or their remains remain unidentified. And it gives you just a little glimpse into, it's not just women, it's all different members of the native communities. But this is happening on social media, and I'm wondering, Carla, is this the way the community is saying, we are doing this for ourselves, we are not going to be victims forever?
Right. I mean, I think that that's a really great point. And I think that there's a tremendous amount that can be done with collaboration, with the grassroots, with the tribes, between state and local law enforcement and the federal government. And that's really what we've recommended in our work, that this is an all hands on deck type of problem. Given the type of circumstances of these cases, given the breadth and the number of these cases, it does require what we call a comprehensive solution. And that comprehensive solution has to be grounded in having a victim-centered approach. Yeah. And that's really what's missing. No one's working together. No one's thinking about the victims. And what Anita's doing is amazing, and I'll be emailing her after this to try to see if we can integrate her data into what we're doing. Sure. But frankly, Anita's work should be supported by the federal government because it's their responsibility to collect this data, and they're not doing it. This is a
clarify. The federal government has actually requested access to my data because they know that I have things they don't. There was a case last week where someone called in with a tip and said, hey, we know this girl's missing. We've seen her in such and such location. Please check up on her. And the FBI had no record of her and had no idea she was missing. But she was logged in the database. So I was able to provide that information to them and in the process tell them, clearly this moment has demonstrated there's value in the community maintaining a role in protecting and caring for this data because we do it in a way that these agencies, even though they're paid to do it, and to clarify, I'm unpaid. This has been 3 years of unpaid work that I've done as a community member. We're doing a better job than
Anita,
they are.
Carla, Jacqueline, tell us one thing, because we're in the last 1 minute of the show. So I just need one thing that makes this situation better. Carla, one thing.
VAWA needs to be amended to include all sexual violence crimes.
Violence Against Women's Act needs to be amended. It actually needs to be updated this year, otherwise we're in trouble. Anita, one thing.
Savannah's Act needs to be amended to require law enforcement to pull archival data on this issue, and that it needs to be written with an enforcement mechanism.
Jacqueline?
Tribal sovereignty needs to be recognized and completely restored, particularly the issue of jurisdiction.
All right, this is easy. Ask the community. They have the answers. They have the solutions. Ladies, thank you for joining us. We continue our Indigenous Views series next Thursday, and we will be looking at South Africa's San people and other Indigenous groups who are taking charge of how anthropologists study them. They are giving them guidelines. You can do this, you cannot do this. We also want to know about your Indigenous stories that you would like us to tell. So you can find us on Facebook at The Stream and at AJ Stream on Twitter. And then you can tell us your story. And then if Malika and I and the team like it, you'll find it right here in the next couple of weeks. Thank you so much for watching. We will see you online. Take care, everybody.